Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Spirit Lift Sundays. So I am still messing with the time, I admit it. This is something that was really, really interesting that came through for me a few minutes ago. And that one of the reasons I was told a couple of weeks ago to do the show at noon is because I have been tested. I'm being tested to see if I still have issues with codependency. And that has been one of the biggest issues of my life. Every time I think I'm done with my codependency issues, something else comes up. And what I discovered this morning is that the reason I've been having a difficult time trying to pick a time for this show and sticking with it is because of my codependency issues. So what do I mean by that? Well, I was arranging this show around another person's spiritual teaching show so that it wouldn't conflict with her teaching. And then I was also trying to arrange the time of the show around my children's schedule and what worked for them. And I realized this morning, a huge aha, that the reason I was having issues with picking the right time to do the show is because I was trying to accommodate it around other people's schedules and other people's time. And I realized that that's another codependent thing right there that Spirit is showing me that I need to not be doing. That I need to do what's best for the audience and I need to do what's best for myself with regard to when I go live with this show. So one of the issues I've been having is if I go live, the entire purpose of doing a live show is so that there is audience interaction. And what I've discovered is if I do the show at noon, then there isn't an audience interaction because everybody's busy doing life. By noon Pacific time, people are out and about, and certainly people on the East Coast are out and about. And I think a lot of my audience is fast asleep by then. Sunday's pretty much over. So what I've realized, I sat and tuned in this morning when is the best time for me to do the show. And it's going to be at 9 a.m. on Sunday mornings. I'd like to be able to do it earlier, but I stay up so late sometimes on Saturday night with my children that doing a show earlier than 9 is just kind of asking a bit too much of me because I like to get up and meditate in the morning before I do these shows and tune into Spirit and see what Spirit has to say. So if my kids want to eat breakfast at 9, they're just going to have to feed themselves. They're perfectly capable of it. And if it conflicts with other people's shows, then it does. I just need to do what is best for myself and what's best for my audience. And that I know is earlier in the day on Sundays. So, but today I'm here. It's 12:30. There is no one in the chat, and that's okay because it is what it is. The message that's been coming through this morning and the last couple of days is about self-responsibility and about victimization. So I'm not going to start with that. I think I'm going to end with that because what I want to start with is a really, really interesting message that came in for me this morning. So this morning I had a communication with an energy, with a being named Archangel Phanuel. Now, I had never heard of him until a couple of months ago when he came into my field a few months ago. And I did some research to find out who he is. And he is one of the 4 angels of the Apocalypse. Actually, he's the 4th angel of the Apocalypse. He's the angel that brings judgment. And so I did a little bit of research on that. And what he was saying this morning is that he's the angel that those who work in the darkness are the most afraid of because he is bringing forward the exposure of how the earth game has actually been played and that he's bringing his judgments with him. And so what he was showing me this morning is that as most of the story, the dark story that's been happening on our planet has been brought to the surface. So we've been calling them conspiracy theories and, all this stuff that's coming to the surface. I do have somebody here. Hi, Angela. Thanks for joining me. And so what he was showing is that the great apocalypse, which is what we are presently in, the modern term for it is the Great Awakening. That is what is happening right now. So the word apocalypse actually means the great revelation, the great revealing of all things once hidden. So what's been happening over the last couple of years is that everything that's been sitting under the surface is starting to come to the surface, and it's bubbling up for people to see and to recognize. A lot of truth is coming to the surface. A lot of conspiracies are coming to the surface. A lot of untruths are coming to the surface. It's just all coming up. And what I was being shown a couple of years ago is that there would come a point when it would be impossible to keep secrets under wraps. And so that's what we're really coming into. And as we enter into more and more of this, we need to be even more about what isn't true. So what I was being shown is that we have been dripped. All of the conspiracies on our planet have been brought to us. Now, I'm not talking about this from good versus evil. I don't really do the good, bad, right, wrong, and all of that. This is more about looking at the human experience from a perspective that is all across the board, and looking at it from a spiritual perspective, as in looking at it and rising above it and gazing down upon it, not down on it as in against it, but just this gazing without judgment of what's happening on the earth plane, because what's happening on the earth plane is the contrast that we all agreed to participate in. And we as souls agreed to experience this contrast until which time this planet became a planet of peace rather than a learning planet. So what we're moving into is out of it being a learning planet and into a planet of peace. So in order for us to move this planet into a planet of peace, everything that is not that needs to be brought to the surface for resolution and transcendence. So that's what's happening, is that all of our collective issues are being brought to the surface for us to resolve. So you can call them conspiracies, conspiracy theories, history that was kept under wraps, false stories. It's all coming to the surface. And it's all coming to the surface for us to be able to look at and resolve. So what we will start to see, according to Archangel Phanuel, is that we will start now in the near future to be able to decipher which of the conspiracy theories are in fact. So some are just theories and making a mess of things, and some of them actually are fact. So we're going to start seeing the facts be revealed, and those who are responsible for the conspiring against the well-being of humanity, conspiring against what is best for humanity, are going to be basically judgments are going to be brought against them. What he was showing me is that all of the lawsuits we're going to start seeing are part of what we would call judgments. So it's literally taking these corporations and these individuals in front of a judge to be held accountable for the choices that they've made, and the choices that they've made that have not been in the best interest of humanity. So what he was showing me is that's a big part of what is going to be happening. So what has happened over the years is the truth has slowly been bubbling up to the surface, actually since 2012, since the 3D 4D conversions in 2012. This stuff has been bubbling to the surface. Back in 2012, it was the March on Wall Street and the 1%, where people were starting to realize that the banking industry and the 1% didn't really have humanity's best interest. And so some of those companies, what's happened since then, and a lot of those companies have merged with each other and have become now corporate empires. And that a lot of this, what's interesting, what I'm seeing is the shifty-eyed game they've been playing is going to start being exposed. And all of those who are responsible for attempting to control humanity rather than liberate humanity are going to be brought under the judgments of Archangel Phanuel. And so I thought that was a really, really interesting message for him to bring through this morning, especially in regard to the lawsuits that I had not put two and two together, but that would explain how he is appearing on the planet. So one of the things he was showing me this morning is that the 4 archangels of the apocalypse are here and very much present on the earth plane. We just don't see them because they're not visible to the human eye, but their work is very much a part of what's happening on the earth plane right now. So for example, Archangel Michael carries the sword of truth, and he has amassed an army of light workers. I don't know light workers necessarily, because there are a lot of people who are working in the light but aren't necessarily within the umbrella term of light workers. So he is with his sword of truth. The truther community is assisting him in bringing all of these stories to the surface so that they can be resolved and processed and transcended. Then there's Archangel Gabriel. What I was being shown this morning about Archangel Gabriel is how he is very much present on the planet right now with his trumpet. And his army are the broadcasters that are now being seen and heard across the planet. And so he works with the messengers, the broadcasters, and the authors, and the teachers are his team, his army of earth angels, of workers in the light. And then there is Archangel, I'm going to find my notes who the other archangel is. It's Michael. This is what happens after you hit 50. Can't read my own handwriting. So he was saying that I should just read this to all of you. Okay, Gabriel works with his trumpet to cross the airwaves with broadcasters. Oh, and the new movie maker. So a lot of people are going to start making movies, documentary movies about what's really happening on the planet. Raphael is the other one. So Raphael is the archangel of healing and disease. So with the virus and the solutions to it, what I was being shown about a year and a half ago, they were actually calling it the Great Pestilence, and that was one of the end of the old world things, is this Great Pestilence, which I understand was the COVID virus. So Raphael is the one that is in charge of that. So when we understand that the 4 archangels of the apocalypse are here and are very present and are helping us move through this process, then we can understand that all of this is part of what's necessary for us to move into the next part of our collective reality. And what he was saying is that there isn't anything that they don't know and that they don't see, and that they are very much involved in every aspect of our present reality and the story that's currently playing out on the earth field. So what Phanuel was showing me is that all of our true history is going to start being exposed, and that it's really, really important that as the true history is brought forward, and we're seeing more and more of it, over the last year, a lot of the true history of what's happened with the African community in the United States that was swept under the rug, a lot of the true history of what happened with the indigenous peoples being brought to the surface and no longer swept under the rug. What's been happening with politics is going to come to the surface instead of being swept under the rug. So all of it is coming out from under wraps. And the visual I'm getting right now is it's all put on a platter. All of it's coming to the surface and put on a platter for us to recognize and to look at, so we can no longer not deny its existence. And for us to resolve it, we have to process it as a collective. We have to resolve it. We have to come solutions for it, and then we transcend it. And once we do, it just becomes part of an old story. So I remember when I first had my awakening experience 10 years ago, when I discovered Esther Hicks and Abraham. And Abraham was saying that if we continue to repeat the drums of our history, history will continue to repeat itself. And so the message that was coming with that this morning is that it's about how we look at our history. If we look at the history when it comes to the surface, and we sit in blame and againstness and victimization of it, it will continue to repeat itself, because that's what happens. If we don't learn the lessons from our history, history will continue to repeat itself. So we need to stop living in being a victim of our past and blaming our past, and instead learn from it and become emboldened to do something about it so that it doesn't repeat itself. And what I was being shown yesterday is that that this energy of victimization and blame is actually a form of self-disempowerment. And I'd never heard that word before, that there is a disempowerment going on. And that's part of the duality reality that we're experiencing. So there's one part of our culture. Now, I discovered back in the 80s, I discovered moving out of victimization and blame and taking full self-responsibility for my life. And at the beginning, it sounded like self-responsibility was so much worse, because it meant that I needed to be responsible for my choices and my actions and how I responded to what happened in my past. And it seemed like blame and victimization was actually easier, when it's actually the other way around. So when we choose to stay in victim mode, we actually disempower ourselves. It causes a disease of the heart, and it makes us blind to our own full possibilities, where self-responsibility allows us to take a look at all of the painful parts of our past and work through them and process them and forgive them and let them go, so that we can create a new reality where that old story doesn't repeat itself anymore. So what I've seen in this duality reality that we're presently in is that this story, a repeating story of victimization, is being used to keep us divided and conquered. And so then there are a portion of people who have discovered how to transcend the past, how to process their past pain stories, and how to move out of victimization and into self-empowerment and self-responsibility. And then there's the other side that pot keeps getting stirred up, and rather than coming to the pot of painful stories and applying healing and renewal and real solutions to these pain stories, the pot just keeps getting stirred up, and it keeps getting stirred up to disempower people from moving forward and empowering themselves to change the story. So it's really important that as these stories come to the surface, that yes, we acknowledge that they are real. For example, the stories of one of the stories from last year was how Black Wall Street was destroyed. And it's really, really important that people understand that, and that there were lives that were destroyed by that. And at the same time, rather than wallowing in the past and wallowing in the misery and disempowering ourselves collectively with those stories, it's taking a look at those stories and saying, how can we as a collective, now that we acknowledge that story exists, how can we heal that story, and how can we move past that story so that it doesn't repeat itself? And so a lot of those stories are going to start coming to the surface. And they're coming to the surface not to blame the past, and not to hold resentment toward the past, and not to hold ourselves in victimization to the past. They're being brought up so that we can process them, extract all of the lessons from them that we can, and move forward from them. So this is all about how we look at our past pain stories. So I was really fortunate, as I said, in the 80s, in my early 20s, to discover what blame and victimization were, how they were affecting my own life, and how I was able to process that. And what that required was me having conversations with the people that had really hurt me in my life. So I know that I don't know what it's like to be in the shoes of an African American or a Native American. I can't imagine what it's like. I can only imagine what it's like to be in those shoes. I only know from my own experience what it was like growing up in a community where women were essentially less than human. I was physically, emotionally, sexually, spiritually, physically abused. I was told that I was nothing more than a stupid girl, and that the only value that I had in life was in my womb, and that I didn't even deserve an education because girls were stupid and didn't even deserve an education. So that was my story of having to then come to a point where I chose to no longer be a victim. And yes, I know about the Me Too movement, and I was sexually assaulted numerous times without getting into the details of it. And I had a lot of forgiveness work to do. So when I talk about coming to a place of no longer holding ourselves as a victim to blame and to past circumstances, I'm speaking from personal experience. The incredible self-empowerment that comes from learning how to recognize first the painful story as it comes to the surface and it's brought up for us to take a look at, and then learning how to process it with forgiveness. So I did sit down with my parents, and I forgave them for raising me the way they did. I forgave a couple of the boys who raped me in high school. And those people that I weren't able to forgive in person, I have forgiven energetically, not to let them off the hook, because they got their own karma to work through. And whatever it is that caused these people to act the way they did toward me, I'm letting karma, source, God, spirit, whatever, taking care of them. I don't have to hold the resentment in my body for the choices that other people have made. So for me, forgiveness was about my own spiritual freedom. It wasn't about letting them off the hook. They will have to deal with their own issues. And so if we can learn to apply this process to our collective past, we'll be able to move into this new world of peace and prosperity for all of humanity so much faster than we ever will sitting and complaining about what has happened in the past. Yes, the past needs to be acknowledged, because we can't process it unless we acknowledge its existence. So what's really important is that it comes up, for it's being surfaced. It's basically, we're doing our collective shadow work. The entire planet is doing our shadow work. And so what that is that all of our dark stories and all of our past pain and all of our suffering and everything that's been swept under the rug and not talked about, it's all coming to the surface so that we as a collective of humanity can process it. So what the archangels were showing this morning is that we have got to get out of blame and victimization. We will not be able to move past our past story while we're holding ourselves in againstness toward our past. So this is going to require taking a good hard look at it. It's going to require us sitting down and having really difficult conversations as how can we collectively create solutions so that we don't continue to repeat the past, so that we do extract all of the lessons from it that best serves the whole of humanity. And I know how difficult that is, because in this fear-based reality we've been living in, it's so much easier to go into blame. It's so much easier to go into againstness. It's so much easier to go into victimization. It's so much easier to blame the other side, to blame the other side of the duality reality that we're in, whether it's the other side of politics or the other shade of skin or the other gender or the other belief system. And instead of blaming the other, coming into our own and accepting responsibility for our responses to what has happened, rather than blaming what has happened on other people. It's important that we recognize what has happened, but blame is a fear-based energy. Blame, shame, againstness, resentment, those are all based in fear. So the only way we're going to be able to move into this love-based reality that we're all wanting to work toward is if we learn to look at our past pain stories through the eyes of love and stop holding them in resentment and blame and againstness. And so I'm sharing that with you now, because what I was shown this morning is that there is going to be more of this uncovered, more stories coming out from under wrap about what has really happened in our collective story. And that as more of these stories start to surface, that we stay out of fear and stay out of egoic attachments to any of it. And that we look at all of these stories as they begin to surface through the eyes of understanding, that they're coming to the surface for us to move through them and rise above them, and not to wallow in them as they come to the surface. And that, what I was being shown by Raphael this morning is that the walls that have been built around these stories are going to start crumbling, and that it's all going to be exposed, all of it. Now, I don't think it's all going to be exposed at once, because humanity can't handle too much information at one time. We are such sensitive beings that the heart can't handle too much information at one time. It would almost be like war. If there were massive explosions or booms of information all at once, it would feel almost in the same way of being in a physical war. This is a spiritual battle, and that the slower the information is leaked, the easier it is for people to process. So those leaks have already happened. Everybody on the planet, for the most part, is already aware to a degree of what's been happening behind the scenes, even though some people might be calling it conspiracy theories. Everyone is now aware that there's something bubbling under the surface, and that as it comes to the surface, it won't be so much of a shock than if it just came from out of nowhere. So this drip system has been happening over the last couple of years to prepare people for waves of information as they start to come. And the guides, the guardians, the archangels are trying to monitor it in a way that it comes out now in waves, but not as in explosions, because that is devastating to the human psyche when human beings are bombarded with explosions. So it's about trying to have this spiritual war, if you will, be as easy for the human consciousness to navigate, so that it isn't so traumatic and such a setback that has come from previous world wars, for example. So this World War III that we are in it's an information war, and that it's being monitored to create as least amount of devastation as possible, if that makes sense. So I think we will start to see more of each of these archangels being present in our reality. That is Michael with his sword of truth, with more truth coming to the surface. Archangel Gabriel with his messengers, with more and more people creating broadcasting channels and broadcasting out across the planet. If this is broadcasting a lot of light, because this is about healing the stories as they surface, so that light can transmute the darkness as it comes to the surface. Archangel Raphael with his healing modalities for the dis-ease that has occurred on our planet. We're going to start seeing more and more of healing the disease come to the surface. And then Phanuel with his bringing the judgments toward those who have been responsible for attempting to control humanity and take us into a dystopian future rather than the utopia, the peace on earth that our souls have all agreed we want to create moving forward. So those are the 4 angels of the apocalypse. And they wanted this morning to let everyone know that they are very much present in this process, and that there isn't anything that happens on our planet that they don't see and that they don't hear and that they aren't aware of. The reason this has become so possible is because the 3D 4D convergence in 2012 basically thinned the veil. The 4th dimension is actually the veil between 3D and 5D. So as the convergence happened, then all of those things that existed within the veil of deception are being shown and being made manifest, so that we can see them and we can heal them and we can transmute them and rise above them. And so I wanted to leave that message with you today, that as more of these truths come to the surface, then rather than get angry and resentful and blame and going into deeper victim, to remember that they're being brought up for us to resolve them with love and with real solutions, rather than getting caught up in the misery of them. And to remember to hold that for everyone, because a lot of people on the planet are not going to understand. There are a lot of people who are being driven by this media to keep stirring the pot and stirring the pot and keeping people in victimization so that they can't rise up. And it's stirring the pot of disempowerment. So this is about learning how to see the story for what it is, as something that we can learn from and that we can transcend, so that history never again repeats itself, and that we have the assistance of these 4 archangels of the apocalypse that are here very much in full force with their armies of light, helping to navigate this great awakening, to navigate this apocalypse that we're in, so that we can all move forward into the world that we want to create. So that is my message for today. I hope all of you find that helpful, and to remember, as I always say, to hold your light so high others can't help but see their own light, because we are here to hold a beacon of light for humanity, while all of these shadows are brought to the surface and resolved and healed once and for all. So I thank you all for being here. Thank you, those of you who joined me on the chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Angela, thank you for being here. Ivan, Thank you. You're so sweet. Frank, thank you for being here. Let's see what he has to say. Okay, he's asking to talk about those that are supposed to help through this time as well. Talking about the past is about speaking your truth, making sure those who share it don't misconstrue your words and they aren't in a place of defense. Hold no resentment, let it go. It's only a journey. That is correct, Frank. Absolutely. And so if we are going to be part of the community that is helping to bring these to the surface, it's also our responsibility. Again, the word responsibility means ability to respond. So if we are here consciously assisting humanity and moving forward, that it's really important that as we assist, that it doesn't come from a place of resentment and judgment against the past. And the only way we're going to move through it is if we see it through the eyes of love and the opportunity that it offers for us to no longer, again, repeat those stories and carry them forward. So what I didn't mention, and I have said this before in the past, is that people keep asking for divine intervention for what's happening on the planet right now. And what a lot of people don't understand is that we are divine intervention in action, that each one of us is one with source, with what we call God, and that source works through each of us. We are all aspects of the divine, and that we are the ones we've been waiting for. And I know I've talked about that before. And those of us in the spiritual community have been talking about this for years, but it's becoming more and more and more obvious that the world of follow the leader is part of the old world, and that we are now in this new world of being the leaders within ourselves. And this is about divine action. And as those four archangels were showing me this morning, that we are actually the ones responsible for creating the change. We're on their teams. They're guiding the teams. And that it's up to us to start getting together and creating communities of change. This means if it's gathering people in our homes who are ready to step up and make a difference. We are it. We get to create the new systems of governance. So we get to create the new systems of business. And it's up to us to do it and start gathering together, even if it means, and of course we know this, it is about this, gathering people who appear to be on the other side and having conversations about how we can unify and move forward. We can no longer expect other people to clean up the mess. It's up to us to clean up the mess that's been made, and to choose how we want to make a difference, getting together collectively. So, one of my visions I've been having lately is creating a community here in my community of people who really want to make an active difference in changing their community. Let's do that. There's no reason that we can't just start gathering people up who want to make an active difference in our community and change how things are done so that it serves everyone, not just the people who have decided that they are better than everyone else by putting themselves at the top. So it's about all of us. We've been waiting for. We are divine intervention in action. And we need to understand that we are the ones who are here to mutually support each other and to put an end to the division. The division isn't going to go away on its own. We are going to have to put an end to it ourselves. And when enough of us get together and put an end to it to ourselves, that starts to become the new reality playing out on our planet. And we need to choose to no longer accept division as the norm. And that's going to take some courage. It is going to take some courage on every person's part to be willing to sit down and have the really, really difficult conversations and help each other move through this really difficult time for our collective of humanity. And we have to be able to have those really difficult conversations without any kind of againstness toward the other people in the conversations. This is about learning how to understand each other's perspectives so that we can work in unity and unify for the greatest good of all concerned. And that's not going to happen while we hold any aspect of ourselves in any kind of againstness. And that's going to be difficult. I think that is where what I'm hearing right now is that is where the light warriors really shine. Ooh, I've never heard that before. That's where the light warriors really shine, in the ability to sit down and lead these new kind of communities and bring people together in unification, even at the beginning when they look like they're on opposing ends. That's what the work of the light warriors is here to do, which is to guide humanity and to step up as the new leaders. And stepping up as leaders in this new world is not going to be easy, because we've got a battle ahead for us of how to unify this intense division that's been created to keep us under, divided and conquered, as they say. And so the new leaders have to become experts at unification and coming to solutions that serve everyone. And so if you see yourself as one of the new leaders in this new world we're creating, understand that it is going to require all of your internal resources and all of the spiritual resources that you have. And I know that a lot of the new leaders are light workers. They've had their spiritual gifts activated. They've processed their own pain stories. They have taken the time to go through and do their own inner work, their own shadow work, so that as we start expanding that outward, it comes from personal experience of the work that's needed to be done to work past and through our own pain stories so that we can help the rest of humanity work through theirs. So if you're someone who hasn't gotten in there and done your own shadow work and processed your pain stories, and you're sitting in judgment toward others, it's understand that that's because there's still stuff that's inside of you that you probably haven't processed yet either. So it's what's really important is that everyone who is working on the side of light, for lack of a better word, who is here on behalf of growing the light on humanity, be willing to continually do that inner work to bring to the surface what we need to resolve within ourselves. So for me, going back to what I said at the very beginning of today's show, was about me recognizing that I still had issues with codependency. Those are one of my shadows that I'm having to work on. And it comes to the surface all the time. I had another broadcaster ask me yesterday why I was trying to accommodate another broadcaster. And I started laughing. I was like, oh my gosh, there's my codependency issue showing up again. And then I thanked her for pointing that out, that I didn't even see that I was being over accommodating to everyone else rather than doing what was best for me in alignment with the work that I'm here to do. Because the work that I'm here to do isn't about accommodating other broadcasters, but that's exactly what I was doing. And then accommodating my teenagers who are perfectly capable of cooking their own breakfast. But that was me, over accommodating mom. And that I needed that to be put in my face, because apparently I still had these codependent issues that I'm navigating, and we all have them. The important thing is that we are willing to recognize that we have stuff from our past that we're all working through, and instead of holding ourselves in resentment toward having those issues, recognizing them as lessons that we can learn through so that we can help other people work through theirs. I wouldn't be able to help other people with their codependent issues if I didn't have any of my own. I wouldn't be able to help other people move out of victimization for sexual assaults and religious abuse if I didn't experience that myself. So this is how we learn to be grateful for the past story, because it's an opportunity. Now, it's never great having to go through it, of course, but once we get to recognize those stories within ourselves and we can look at them with new eyes, rather than looking at them through blame and againstness and victimization, we can look at them then from a place of self-empowerment of, oh, now that I can see that as I went through that pain story for myself, now I can help a lot of other people move through their own pain story so that we can all get through this together. One of the things Spirit was showing me a couple of years ago in this ascension that we're in is that no one gets left behind. That's ultimately the desire of Spirit, of the guardians, of the non-human beings that are in our astral realm, if you will. The desire is for all of us to ascend, not just a few of us, and that no one gets left behind. And so that's why it's so important that we do our own inner work so that we can help other people cross the bridge. I don't want to cross the bridge by myself. That would be awfully lonely and boring. Since bring as many people with us as possible. So a lot of us had these really, really painful childhood stories specifically so that we could help other people through theirs. And when we can get to the point where we can actually be grateful for our really painful past, that's when we're able to help other people through their painful past. And that's why we're being called to be leaders. It's a different kind of leadership. It's not the old leadership of, hey, follow me, I'm the best. It's about I know, because I've been through this, and I can teach you how to move through this as well. It's a complete heart-based, heart-centered leadership is completely different. There's no egoic attachment to it at all of I'm the best and I'm the guru. It's more of this is what I have experienced, and if I can help you move through your own experience as well, then all of humanity wins. Because when one of us is healed, the rest of humanity is healed a little bit more. And so when we're coming at this new reality, this new leadership from a space of genuine love for all of humanity, a genuine love for all life on earth, and a genuine desire for other people to feel what it feels like to no longer be haunted by the past, then that's the kind of leadership that humanity needs right now. And it's not easy to get to that point because we have to be willing to look at all of our issues and look at our past pain stories and, dig them up and look them in the face and navigate them. And some of it's not very fun. Once you process a pain story, and it's an incredible euphoria that comes with processing it. And that being this kind of leader is a different kind of leader, because it's about owning our own stuff and not seeing ourselves as above anyone else. It's more of, it's interesting. The visual I'm getting right now is Yeshua in the Bible, how he was a shepherd, but he didn't push the sheep from behind. He walked in front and just allowed his flock to follow him without any kind of ego about whether the flock followed him or not. It was just him leading. And that's the kind of leadership that we're moving into. And that's the kind of leadership that's being called forth on our planet right now, is for some of us to be willing to stand out in front and show the way for the rest to follow. And that isn't the kind of leadership, maybe in spurts across our known history, but the kind of leadership we've had until fairly recently has been more of the it's either the leader in the front who's like, I'm the best, you gotta follow me, or a taskmaster from behind with the whip telling us, forcing us to go in the direction that the leaders want us to go. And that's ego-based, fear-based leadership. So in this heart-based, love-based leadership, it's all about, I'm the one who's willing to step out into the forefront and do the work so that the rest of humanity can follow. And so that's what's being asked of us now, for those who are willing to step out into leadership, to do that with great courage and with great love for all of humanity. And that's how we move through all the stuff that's coming to the surface, and all the stories that are being brought up for resolution, and all of the shadows that are coming up for processing, so that we can tell our past from a new empowered perspective, and we can create this new world from the heart first. And that's what's being asked of all of us. I thank you again all for being here. Thank you. There's someone named Frank in the chat. Frank, thank you so much for being here. It's such beautiful, amazing comments that you're leaving here. And I thank you for being here with me today. All of you who are here, for being with me today. And for being the light that you are on the planet. There are getting to be more and more and more bright lights across the planet. And what I was being shown a couple of weeks ago is that we are creating such a web of light across the planet that it is becoming unbreakable. That this light is so wet, so dense, and so it's funny, I'm seeing like a spider web, but the best web you can imagine. What I'm hearing is New Earth Web. Spirit's got such a sense of humor. So this New Earth Web is all light-based, and it is so closely tied together and so tight that it is unbreakable. That's where we are now. And that as each of us stand up in the light and hold up our light, that more and more and more darkness will have no choice but to dissipate, because as we know, darkness cannot exist in the presence of light, and that fear cannot exist in the presence of love. So it's up to every single one of us to remember that we are the light and the way. And I think that's what Yeshua was trying to say, that we are all the light and we are all the way, and that we are all one with God's source spirit, and that we are all divine intervention in action. And now more than any other time on our planet, we need to remember that, because we are the ones we've been waiting for. And it's time to step it up, to be willing to step out and start creating these communities and building the new infrastructure. And also, the one more thing, maybe I'll record this as a separate video, this channel messages that came in this morning from the archangels, was that the infrastructure that all of the dark forces, if you will, have been hiding behind are starting to crumble. And all that's going to be left of our old systems is the foundation and scaffolding, which I thought was really interesting. So we get to build entirely new structures. So if we understand that that the walls of the old world are coming down and being rebuilt from just the foundation and scaffolding, that we are the ones that get to create that. And we will create that by getting together in small groups and organizing them. And how do we change our communities? And then as our communities begin to expand outward, if we want to change the country's political system, it begins within our own communities. So we need to start doing that, and not being afraid to have those really difficult conversations, and not being afraid to put ourselves out in the forefront of the change that needs to be made. And that we've got support. we have each other supporting each other. We have the guardians of light, as they refer to themselves to be, supporting us. We have the archangel supporting us. We have hosts of angels supporting us. And we have an entire army of light workers on this planet that are doing the work as well. So sometimes it might seem like we're small, but we aren't. We are mighty. There are millions of us. And all that we need to do is to figure out how to come together and work together in cooperation to create this world that we all envision of peace and harmony and prosperity for all. So that is my message for today. Thank you again, all of you, for being here, for joining me in the middle of the day. And again, next week I am going to start earlier and honor my time and honor your time, and showing up earlier in the morning, and rather than my codependency of putting everybody else's schedules first. So that is, there's always work, right? There's always something else to work on. As a friend of mine said, when the work is all done, we die. So if there's still work to do, it means we're still alive. So again, until next week, thank you all for being here. I love you all so much. And there's so much that we are capable of when we learn how to come together and work together and be the ones we've been waiting for. So until next week, I love you all, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.